All righty. Well, good morning, Unity of Louisville. It is so great to be with you this morning. Now, when Reverend Valerie and I planned for me to come to your community and give a talk and do a workshop, it was months and months ago, and we had no idea that it wouldn't be in person. But as I've said at many places since March, the good thing is we have all of this wonderful technology so we can still come together in sacred spiritual community. So thank you for welcoming me. So the title of my talk is, That's My Story, and I'm Willing to Give It Up. Now we all have a story, that collection of experiences we've had in our lives. Some of them are positive, some leave a lot to be desired. But what we often do is latch onto the challenging ones, making them the central narrative through which we filter current and future events. So I've got two stories from my life I'd like to share with you. When I was about 6 months old, I had big brown eyes and slicked down jet black hair, and I was smiling all of the time. And when I look back at those pictures, it seemed like I was just so excited to be here. My mother used to tell me stories about taking me out in the stroller when I was a toddler and double strapping me in because she was afraid I might fall out because I was always jumping up and down and waving and trying to say hi to everybody. And when I look at those pictures of me at those ages, it looks like there was this vibrant light that oozed from every pore of my body. And I'm sure I thought that life, no matter what it was, every day was exciting and new. I was fed and I was clothed and I was bathed and I was held, and people oohed and awed all over me. Life was simply wonderful. But as I was growing up, things started to change. Suddenly, the external messages I was getting from those around me weren't quite as rosy, and just being myself became a challenge. All of a sudden, other people had a lot to say. Now, whether you're a boy or a girl or however you identify yourself, some of these might sound familiar to you. You're not smart enough, or you're too smart for your own good. Your race or your sexual orientation is wrong. You're not Black, Hispanic, gay, straight, whatever, enough. You're too tall or you're too short. You're too fat or you're too thin. You're too young or you're too old. Your faith is wrong, or you need to hold certain beliefs. You really should drive this car. You should wear these clothes. You don't belong in this neighborhood. Or perhaps you've forgotten where you came from if you live in a certain place or a certain manner. And this list goes on and on and on. And these supposed guidelines for living can be heavy burdens to bear. So here's my second story from my life to share with you. In the spring and summer months, I like to ride my bike to the gym. It's a great way to get exercise. It's only about 2 miles from my house. I can leave my car at home, and I always go the same way just out of habit. But I had been thinking for a while about going a different route just to do something different and see some new scenery. So on Tuesday, July 18th, 2017, I left my house. I went up to the corner, and that first corner is where I always turn right. And when I got to the corner, I thought, you know what? Let's make today the day. Let's go straight. So I crossed over the street, was riding downhill, not particularly fast, totally aware of my surroundings. And up ahead on the sidewalk, I saw what looked like rocks and gravel strewn across it. And I realized later that in my attempts to avoid the rocks and gravel, I overcorrected by squeezing both brakes. The bike screeched to a halt. The back wheel reared up, and all I heard myself say was, and just like in the movies, like when they're maybe trying to show someone having a flashback or an out-of-body experience, everything went white. And when the whiteness disappeared and life came back into focus, I found myself on the ground on all fours with most of my weight on my left arm. And due to the intense pain, it took me about 10 seconds to realize I had probably broken that arm. To this day, I don't remember anything that happened in between the white. The only evidence I had that I had obviously gone over the handlebars and rolled was that my bike and my backpack were up on the sidewalk in front of me. I had road rash all over my body. And when I looked back at my helmet later, there were scratches where my head had obviously hit the ground. Fortunately, I was able to reach my backpack with my right arm, pull out my cell phone, and call a friend who lived a few blocks away to come and help me. So after I hung up with her, laying on the ground in intense pain all by myself, the first thing that came to my mind was, Lysa, say your gratitude list. So I just started talking out loud, everything that I could think of. I'm on the sidewalk and not in the street. It's daytime and not nighttime. It's a sunny day and not raining. I'm only 2 miles from the hospital. I have health insurance. My friend who's coming to get me, she'll know exactly what to do. And the biggest thing on that gratitude list for me was, God is here. A man jogging by, my friend that I had called, and some people driving down the street who saw me on the ground all stopped right around the same time and called 911. So after the police came and the paramedics came, I was put on the stretcher and into the ambulance for the ride to the hospital. And on the way, I asked the very cute, I might add, paramedics, I hadn't hit my head that hard that I missed that, if they would say my gratitude list with me. And one of them said, well, what's a gratitude list? And I said, it's all the things I have to be grateful for, even while this is happening to me right now. So they jumped right in and said it with me. So once I got to the hospital, got to the emergency room, I got the distressing news that I had actually broken my left elbow. And I will spare you the gory details of what I fortunately couldn't see very well because it was going on out here. But I had to have surgery, and right away. So as you might imagine, once I got home, all drugged up, my arm wrapped from my shoulder to my wrist, many of the abilities that I had and realized that I had taken for granted were suddenly taken away, even if only temporarily. Cooking, driving, opening the toothpaste, brushing my hair, typing with 2 hands, tying my shoes, changing my clothes, everything was a challenge. Being grateful for what I could do had gotten lost in the shuffle. In the early days of my recovery, I realized what I was really suffering from was an overwhelming feeling of worthlessness. And what I was telling myself about those breaks in my arm was, see, you can't do anything right. Why did you have to go a different way to the gym? The other way was working just fine. You always make bad decisions. These problems you're having, they're all your fault. You're no good to anybody like this. Once again, I was tying my self-worth to my old childhood stories, what other people had to say about me. But like I said, we all have a story, that collection of experiences in our lives. But in latching on to the challenging ones, we allow our inner critic to sit on our shoulder and whisper those stories to us over and over and over. In the book Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, he talks about something that he calls a forgiveness centrifuge. And he explains a forgiveness centrifuge kind of like having a juicer, where you put something in, spin it around, and separate the 2 parts. And the forgiveness centrifuge, he says, we can use to separate the facts of what happened in our lives from our interpretation of the facts. So for example, your fact may have been that as a child, your father left the family. Your interpretation of that fact might have been that it was because of you, that you were bad or wrong, or you did something you shouldn't have done, or you didn't do something that you should have done, and you took his leaving to mean that it was about you. Your fact may have been that you had a certain career goal, or maybe other people said that it was bad or wrong, or that boys or girls can't or do or be that type of thing. Your interpretation of that fact might have been, well, my ideas are stupid. Or maybe I really need to ask everybody else what I should do with my life because I can't be trusted to do it on my own. Or you may have even thought, well, who am I to have a dream in the first place? And those false stories that we tell ourselves work in what always might be considered a positive situation. So I have a friend who says she had a wonderful childhood. She loved every minute of it. She was told how smart she was and how resourceful she was. She was a good kid. She got good grades. She played well with others. She ate her vegetables. Nothing but positive input. Those were her facts. Her interpretation of the facts were, because of all those accolades, she had no room for error. If she messed up, people would see that she really didn't have it all together and that she was a failure. But once we can clearly see the difference between the facts of what happened in our lives and our interpretation of the facts, we can make conscious choices guided by our higher self about whether or not those stories are serving us any longer. Now, the willingness to look at our stories is not about spiritual bypassing or looking at the world through rose-colored glasses or what some people might call denial. Rather, knowing that we have the power to reframe our old stories. So I have 5 steps to help you do just that, to take our stories, put them in that forgiveness centrifuge, look at which stories are true and which ones are error thinking, and take the latter and reframe them to chart a new conscious path for the future. So here we go. Step number 1, stop and take a deep breath. Stop and take a deep breath. Let's all do that now from wherever we are. When you do that, you sit or stand a little taller. Your shoulders open up a little bit. It allows maybe just a little bit of space for something new to come in. Step number 2, thank the old story for getting your attention. Thank the old story for getting your attention. Whatever it is, it's trying to tell you something. Step number 3, reframe the old story. Reframe the old story. Is that story you're telling yourself absolutely true? How is it true? Why is it true? Do the people who love and support you the most believe that story too? If you're having trouble answering these questions, more than likely, it is your inner critic sitting on your shoulder as doing the talking. Step number 4, reframe the old story. Reframe the old story. You can ask yourself things like, what is the opposite of this old story? Or how do I want to feel without the burden of this old story? Or what if I choose not to believe this story this time at all? And step number 5, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're changing negative patterns of thought that have been deeply rooted in your subconscious mind, sometimes for years, and it takes time. Beating yourself up for having those old thoughts and feelings is like going to the gym one time and expecting your body to look exactly the way you want it to. But it doesn't work that way. We're just putting one story in that forgiveness centrifuge at a time, spinning it around, and separating the facts from our interpretation of the facts. If you practice these 5 steps on a regular basis, I guarantee you will experience amazing results. So I have a new arm. I call it my new bionic arm. And if you were to look at pictures of the x-rays, you would see where I have a bunch of pins where they put them in to stabilize the bones and a plate at my elbow here holding it all together. So what I say now about those cracks in my arm, my old childhood stories, is this. I am adventuresome and like to try new things. I am capable and smart. My vulnerability is one of my strengths. People love me for who I am, not what I can do. I am grateful for the lessons and blessings hidden in this experience. And at that plate holding it all together, I now say, I am worthy and I love myself just the way I am. And to that cute little girl, my older, wiser self says, you were born a perfect expression of God. You always have been, and you always will be. Those other things were your old stories, but it's time to give them up. You just need to believe in yourself because you are far more than you know. So I've written an affirmation for us today, and I'll say it first, and then for wherever you are, let's say it together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Let's say that together. I have the power to reframe my old stories and chart a new conscious path for the future. Unity of Louisville, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me into your homes. I'm doing a workshop this afternoon at 12:30 where we'll delve into this topic a little bit further. I look forward to seeing you again in person in your beautiful spiritual community space. Thank you again, and namaste.